It's not the best way of explaining it, but that's what I'll go with for now. And we will continue on to say that, or I will continue on to say that, again, there was a little in-between era that could have been fixed, but I'll get to it eventually. If I were to improve said season of Impmon, or at least his character, I would have decided to essentially lengthen the process, make it a bit more lengthy, a bit closer to Zuko's time frame. But as for what it was, I think the attempt was worthy or good enough at the time. Moving on to Jerry, whose name I actually remembered now after thinking about it, was the girl Takato had a crush on. With that, her self-depression and self-doubt is what kept her from moving forward, and this allowed this creature to take form and essentially wreak havoc on both worlds, well, primarily the human world at this point in time, which led into the final stretch of the season. And from here, this is where a lot of fans would say, arguing that the after seasons 3 moving onward is where things started to slip in quality. And while I agree to the extent of which it fails is probably more so up into trying to figure out what qualities are the most intrinsical to storytelling. So we move on to, I believe I might do this out of order. I'm doing this in order of what I remember. I believe it was Digimon Data Squad, and then it was Digimon Frontier 4 and 5 seasons respectively. Data Squad being the season where they brought in essentially this whole punching gimmick for a while. And it was a dip in quality, I will not deny that. However, to say that it didn't have its strong parts would be a little bit unfair, I suppose. So, the one character I would say that really pulls through is Keenan. This is a human character that ends up in the digital world as a baby. So he ends up growing up thinking that he's a Digimon. And yes, it does lead to some awkward translation issues down the line where Keenan speaks broken English even though other Digimon around him already speak English. It doesn't add up 100%, but I kind of think I know what they were going for. An early jungle-like character, like, say, George of the Jungle, or something of that nature. A human character that's out of his element. That's what they were attempting to go for. It doesn't work as strongly for Digimon, however, I think the deeper theme of this character is what really shines through, that being a character that has been stripped away from a certain way of thinking for so long, and truly believing that he is among one kind, and as the show develops and as his character develops, his heart starts to see that his heart can belong to both worlds, that he can, that his heart is strong enough to, to still care for Digimon while taking care of the humans that have raised him and have lost him along the way. A pretty interesting arc. Definitely one of the arcs that withheld that season pretty strongly for me, at least. And from moving on from that, I will say that I think that that arc was handled pretty smoothly, surprisingly, all things considered. For a season that was a little bit weaker, I think it had one of the better character through lines. in terms of just keeping it consistent within its ultimate goal, which is to have Keenan express concern for both worlds. With that, I would like to move on to Digimon Frontier. Now, this is the season where the gimmick was the Digimon, or the humans became the Digimon. And a lot of people would say that this is definitely the hallmark of when things fell apart. And that's definitely the stronger contenders for one of the weaker seasons of Digimon. It does seem like they watered down a lot of the character, a lot of the heart, and some of the characters even shared some of their character stories, like JP and his crush girl, whose name I can't remember at the moment. Those two have a very similar story. You have your TK-like character, etc., etc. I don't mind characters repeating storylines, it's just that it's to a slightly lesser extent. And I do like the evil side as it progresses further along. I like the idea of Lucymon, for example, this character that was able to deceive through his kind-heartedness, and if you were to improve the season, I would definitely stretch that out make the character stand out just a little bit more. I, for one, think that the gimmick is totally fine of Digimon, or humans turning into Digimon. I think that is a very cool gimmick. But, as I will say time and again, it's not so much about the gimmick for me, it's about the characters and how they're handled. And again, for Digimon Frontier, that was, again, a watered-down version of that. Moving on from that, the next season that I would like to talk about is Digimon Cross Wars, and after rewatching it, there does seem to be a very distinct, heavy change in format for that show, particularly toward the end. And I will say that this one is a little bit more annoying as dealing with Thomas and his regurgitated storyline being repeated from time to time, and other characters not really standing out and particularly all too well. Shoutmon does remind me a lot of Zatch Bell. I think the character of Shoutmon was 100% inspired by Zatch Bell. For those of you who don't know Zatch Bell, not only would I recommend also checking out Zatch Bell, but Zatch Bell is about a boy, or I should say more specifically a demon child, that was sent among 100 other ones to compete for the throne, and he wanted to become the king of the Momoto, and that too became the desire of Shoutmon. He wanted to become the king of Digimon, and he did so to protect them. So he had a pretty inspiring goal from the very offset, and his journey to get there has some bumps along the way, though I would say the humans, by comparison, their arcs are a little bit bumpier at particularly odd times. There is the youngest character who ends up being, manipulated into thinking that the digital world is just a game. That little premise does help the female character in the group, and Ewan, the younger brother among them, to help her stand out. As she was on her own, I can't really say there isn't much else to pull out of that character, if that makes any sense. So I would say that there were elements of Digimon Cross Wars that work. It's just that either they got a little bit too repetitive in some instances, or they needed a bit more meat in that substance. They needed a bit more to grasp onto. And I think some of that has to do with either, I think timing in a lot of these cases is a big factor. I think introducing the brother character sooner would have helped the sister character out, and for Thomas, having him be lost for a longer period of time instead of being back and forth constantly. Again, dare I compare it to Kylo Ren once more. And finally, it clicking on its head. Well, Thomas doesn't necessarily ever kill anyone, so I think that's a bit unfair on his part, but still, the consistent shifting doesn't really help either. And it's only after one of his Digimon gets, like, majorly hurt where he starts to finally get it for, like, the 5th or 6th time, of, like, oh, I should work with my Digimon and with these other humans to help, you know, the bigger picture. Again, just the timing of these things and how, you know, instead of rebumping it and instead stretching it in other ways that can compel and can intrigue the audience into saying, well, what else, you know, how far can you pull it while still being entertaining and really good to watch. So that's Cross Wars in a nutshell. And I did watch Digimon App. That is the... Of course, I had to watch it in Japanese. That's the major difference. I'm pretty sure that probably won't be coming over here for a while, if at all. But with the Digimon resurgence that now that's happening, I can't really say for sure. So that is my offset with the series. And to briefly go over the video games, I feel like it holds a very similar pattern to the show, is that Digimon World 1 through 3 were particularly, to me, very strong video games, and then at 4 is where it started to falter, and then Digimon Battle Online arrived on the scene, which was Digimon's attempt at an MMORPG, and was soon replaced by Digimon Masters Online, which is a online game that is still functioning, but it is pay to win, which is very unfortunate. So, Digimon has definitely had its lowlights in video games, and I would still say that Digimon Masters Online has a lot of issues that I have, whether it's paying to switch out your Digimon, or, you know, the pay-to-win method at all, and what really gets to me is not so much that, you know, it's pay-to-win because it's initially free, but more so the gambling mechanic behind it, because I know that is a bigger issue. I don't mind a service of, like, you know, because the game, it still has to make money somehow. I do understand money. After all, that is my cutie mark. I understand that people have to make money, but still, the gambling aspect of that is where I draw the line. I think that is unacceptable, and everything should be at an affordable price, which is something I'd also argue is something that is severely lacking in Digimon Masters Online. The pricing of items is pretty hefty, especially the gambling mechanic-based items. But my problem started as early as Digimon World 4, and I think it was an attempt to kind of veer into the Diablo-esque type of gameplay of swinging a weapon and picking up plenty of loot. However, its downfalls included not having any characters, or not having any distinct in combat, I should say, making the combat become pretty generic really, really fast. While I could probably say that the story has some merit to it, but I don't really remember a lot of the elements of the story, so I can't really say for sure. But again, the characters themselves aren't characters at all. They're more like skins that you can change between, more or less. And that to me is always an issue when you're promoting characters in your game. More so, again, Digimon World 1 through 3 are really fantastic, and the downfall came through Digimon World 4, and declined for a while. And again, a part of the resurgence of Digimon, you have Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, which is a grand story, and its sequel, Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth Hacker's Memory, which seems to be an even longer story. Those stories compel me a lot more, where you have the Digimon able to interact and have a little bit of mystery and a little bit of discovery and a little bit of drama and a little bit of action, a little bit of romance, a little bit of everything. So those games are what reinvigorated the video game aspect of Digimon into the current era. So with that being said, is the big question, where does Digimon go from here? Well, it seems like the resurgence is real, with the movies of Digimon Tri, which has had their issues, but I think when you sort of streamline it into thinking of it as a series, which was its original idea, it does work a little bit stronger, but it still has some issues there as well. But I would be dismissive to say that it is some of the characters I grew up with. So being able to connect back to those characters is a lot easier for someone like me to do. So there is that, to say the very least. But I'm not going to say that it's going to capture any person that's coming in new, unfortunately. I would probably argue that that's a lot closer to Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth and its sequel to do in the video game realm. But as for the TV series, we have one more movie to go, which is the final Digimon Tri movie, so you can expect a review on the main channel for that. As well as, again, as I mentioned, Digimon Survive, which is at the tail end of this year, as far as I've been seeing. So, again, just to lastly emphasize that the world of Digimon seems to be fully invigorated and fully bursting out of the seams, and at an opportune time, to say the very least. In a time where more and more Pokemon fans, if, I dare make the comparison to Pokemon, which is, I waited several minutes to get to that argument. But it's not so much about that, but I did mention Pokemon very briefly at the beginning as a show I watched, but more as a competitor to Digimon. It is very interesting to see in the 2020 sphere that Pokemon is starting to struggle a lot more and more with Sword and Shield, and more fans are becoming more and more disappointed and angry and frustrated. And on the other side of the sphere with Digimon, we are seeing a reinvigoration. So it actually finally seems like Digimon is starting to gain the upper ground in terms of what is actually becoming popular. And if Pokemon continues to go down the route it's going, continuing to dissatisfy customers and fans along the way with its constant withholding of Pokemon trading and shows that are just sort of not living up to full expectations, except for one key blast moment where Ash Ketchum finally won a trophy. And I'm not going to ignore that. It is a big triumph for the show of Pokemon, but one triumphant moment does not make a good show, necessarily. Now, I have not seen the rest of that Pokemon show in general, but I will say that comparatively speaking, again, that Digimon seems to be in a perfect spot for its resurgence. And yes, it is sort of at the cost of Pokemon, but Pokemon and Pokemon Company kind of did it to themselves. So they put themselves in that situation. So Digimon had their, their bottom of the barrel moment for a while, but now it finally seems like Pokemon is starting to get to that point in its timeline. And right at the peak of, or right at the start of that, I should say, is where Digimon is starting to resurge. Again, where we're getting more video games, we're getting a series finale. There's an announcement of another Digimon project somewhere along the way. There is a lot of Digimon, is what I am trying to emphasize here. And at a time where, again, Pokemon seems to be severely at a disadvantage. They're losing their fans, they're upsetting their fans. So it's going to be an interesting year to see where Pokemon and where Digimon align in their competitive nature. As I know a lot of people have made the comparison to Digimon to Pokemon in the past, it'll be very interesting to see what happens at the tail end of this year, to see where Digimon will land once that final movie arrives. Once Digimon Survive comes out, where will Pokemon be at that point in time, after Sword and Shield, after its debacles that it has gone through? What is Digimon is going to start getting the upper hand? It remains to be seen, but I think that Digimon is on the right track here. And with that, I would like to end this video about Digimon. But before I do, the other reason I decided to make this video was to compare Digimon to My Little Pony. After all, this is a My Little Pony channel technically still, even though I'm trying to move further and further away from it. So I thought I would make the final remark as to compare this to the show of My Little Pony. And with each video I decide to make further down the line, it's probably going to be further and further disattached from My Little Pony. That may very well be the case. I can't say for sure quite yet. I don't want to make any videos about any of the predictions of what they're going to do with the little miniature version of My Little Pony with the little other small style. I don't want to make a video like that. It doesn't really interest me at the moment. I'd rather talk about things that actually interest me still. And Digimon is definitely one of those topics, even if it's been at it hit that curveball at some point. But its resurgence has had me very fascinated for quite some time now. So, getting back to the comparison at hand, I think it's pretty interesting that My Little Pony is a show about friendship. And Digimon, to me, has always been a show about friendship to me. The friendship, of course, being between humans and their respected Digimon into each other as human friends. And to make each other stronger throughout each of their journeys. And of course, Digimon was able to get, to me, a lot darker and a lot more... it was able to have odder moments for sure, again, due to translations. I'm not going to necessarily pin that necessarily on the show itself, but in comparison to My Little Pony is where things get to me a little bit interesting. To me, My Little Pony has a interesting issue. One where, looking back on it, it's very clear that there are two different ideologies going on within that show. One, the first ideology, being a show that is, at the end of each episode, it has a theme. And to that extent, there are only so many life lessons you can teach people. And unfortunately, for a show like My Little Pony that it goes on for 9 seasons, there is going to be an inevitable point where you start to reuse, which My Little Pony did, its lessons over and over again. Now, for character's sake, you could argue whether or not each episode, the character learning a lesson a second time, in which proximity, whether or not that's breaking continuity or not. There have been uh, you know backs and forths on which episodes do that specifically, uh, but that really takes place more at the tail end of the series for My Little Pony. So there was that. There was, each episode trying to teach a lesson, and then there were the season openers and finishers of My Little Pony that were very indicative of an adventure type of series. Now, I want to make things very crystal clear because I saw a video made by one Lily Orchid, once known as Lily Pete, but I will refer to the new name, or the newer name, I should say, of Lily Orchid, who said that the world building of My Little Pony is essentially what ruined it, among other things. And yeah, I do agree with the Starlight Glimmer aspect of that. But, to be fair, I came to that conclusion before I even knew who Lily Orchid was. So I'm not gonna say that she, changed my mind into thinking Starlight was a terrible character. I came to that conclusion first, and then was introduced to Lily Orchid. But, getting back into it, I don't think the whole world building part is the issue, which is something she brings up in her video. And to that I say, did you rewatch the first episode? The very first part of the narration exclusively mentions the world of Equestria. So yeah, I don't think you were in the right to go on a whole tangent about world building when the world is the very first thing they mention in the show. Heck, Twilight's journey is about moving to Ponyville and learning about friendship. That is the point. When you kind of alter the point of the show to try to make a point by saying the world building is bad, I think it is a very big misdirection, and that is a very big flaw that has been continuously irking Lily Orchid's channel for a while now. But that's in the past. But of course, I'm always willing to see content creators become better at making content, so there's always that. But more so on the show of My Little Pony, it was, again, a mix between an adventure show within its season openers and enders, and a season, or a episode by episode slice of life / theme-based episode within every episode. Now, I have said this a lot on my channel, especially during the tail end of the show, that there should have been, or could have been, a lot of episodes that are either two-parters, or even three-parters or more, kind of connecting a thread of episodes that sort of all equal to one moral. And to that, I think would have solved a lot of the show's issues. It would have mixed the blend between adventure and teaching morals to kids, is sort of blending in several episodes to teach one of those morals, and sort of have it carry out throughout, say 5 episodes or 3 episodes, depending on what your theme is. And the bigger the theme, the more episodes you want to dedicate to that type of theme. And if you can contain an episode to a singular theme, which I do think is possible, My Little Pony has done 3 themes in an episode once and successfully has done so. So I'm not saying that's not in the realm of impossibility, but it is at the risk of kind of meshing too many ideas in one place and doing it poorly. And it's very easy to do it poorly. And that's what the later seasons provide, is a lot more examples of doing things poorly, because it's more mixing and mixing it all up. Excuse me. And to that I say, Digimon had that rise, or it's having that rise now, whereas My Little Pony, again, while it is claimed to be continued, and I'm pretty sure it will continue in its 10th season, but as far as I'm concerned, if it's not in a television format, to me, everything beyond that is not simply just a whole new adventure to me, and something I probably won't even look into or review, because it's in a format that I don't really care to explore anymore. Uh, on top of the fact that the ending had way too many flaws and way too many issues, among other things. So I don't think, at least for now, My Little Pony has a place for me, where I have a lot of things going on right now. A lot of video games that I am playing on my main channel, a lot of movies that I'm catching up on my main channel, and again, with the resurgence of Digimon, it is probably going to take it's probably going to retake the top spot of something I will probably actually cover once those things arrive. Uh, so it is interesting to see an earlier version of the whole friendship formula, and showing that, Digimon does that blend I talked about. It has an overall arc. It has the villains coming back a bit more consistently. It has Digimon and Tamer alike learn lessons throughout 3 or 4 episodes instead of just one by one by one. Digimon had the format correct, and I think that's why it's more successful, objectively speaking. Objectively speaking, it just did the formula better. It correctly calculated where characters needed to grow, where they needed to show signs of weakness, where it needed to show their character arc and have that character arc actually be an arc instead of just, a mini, blip hill. I guess what would be one episode considered worth of character development. Actually stretching that out, actually having the character explore emotion, explore, all of these different things, and having them not do it alone, but, push and pull each other through these different elements, and so on and so forth. I think that's where ultimately My Little Pony should have been the entire time, if I'm being completely honest. You have your old Nightmare Moon at the beginning, have her pop up a bit more. Have episodes where the characters are going through stories that sort of naturally bridge into the next episode. Have the characters develop over time in a way that corresponds to the journey rather than within the episode, so they have a bit more time to get to that conclusion of, be kind, be helpful, etc., etc. The basic lessons, the drill, friendship of stuff. So just handling it in such a better way, an objectively better way, pacing it out well. And I do think that is an issue that has been consistent around current media, and even within Digimon itself. I did mention Impmon's story before, and how I felt like the tail end of that story was a little bit more poorly rushed, unfortunately. So, it does seem like a lot of things when it comes to movies versus a series is that the series of something will always have that advantage of having that time, but that time has got to be spent properly instead of, just hill hopping. If I were to create a term for it, I would use the phrase hill hopping as what My Little Pony felt like each episode, whereas a season of Digimon felt like an adventure where characters learned throughout through several episodes, and continuously grew. And Digimon moved on, whereas My Little Pony stayed with the main characters for quite a while, and then sort of introduced new characters, but then sort of just kind of neglected them. I also felt like that was a pretty cheap low blow for all of the new characters. The Student Six in particular, uh, among them, just Ocelus's treatment during the end of that was just awful. Objectively, just really underplayed, just having nothing to do at the end. Uh, I felt like there was something there for Yuna, uh, but I've made my case about how I feel about Yuna already, where I feel like, her character has that unfortunate circumstance of having to rebuild the image of the entire Yak race because of the previous two episodes with the Yaks. They were not well handled at all. Two of the more poor episodes of My Little Pony, so Yona had to bridge that gap first and be a character second, and that is very unfortunate to the character. And them trying to explore some of their ideas, even with Yona in that context, definitely fell flat. Again, some of their episodes, the dating one in particular with Sandbar, her trying to assimilate to the pony life. I think that's one of the weaker episodes of My Little Pony throughout its entire history. It's definitely one of the worst episodes when you actually think about the context of what they're trying to say. You have two really, really big themes in that episode. You have sort of the tradition of a culture which was very poorly handled in and of itself, which doesn't lend itself really well to the episode in question. The Yaks had the opportunity to have their tradition fully explored, and they just completely wasted it. And when you have a culture or you have a representation of tradition that is bad, when said character says, hey, I want to change the way I am from my culture, to me that isn't a bad thing. It isn't at all. If your tradition is bad, you should be trying to avoid the bad thing. And yeah, she did go over the top with her performance, sure, and she kind of goofed up, but, blame the dress or whatever. Um, you know, that is on its own accord a bit messy, but again, it comes from a place of trying to understand one element and getting it completely indulged in another element. Two different themes clashing with each other, and that should never be the case. And in the case of My Little Pony, you have a clash where the clash is tradition. If you don't handle that well the first time, again, it just comes across really poorly when you say, oh, that character's just fine the way they are. They can continue just to be exactly the same. Everything's fine. To me, that's not character development. That's the opposite of character development. That's telling me you want to stay in the exact same place you were when you started the episode. That's not a good moral to teach anyone. When the context also includes that the tradition itself is bad. You want to start in a place that is bad and go back to a place that is bad. That is what you are telling your audience. That is not good representation of anything. And of course, getting outside of the objective nature and talking about subjective nature, how I feel about things, again, I would argue that the stronger feeling episode within the dating realm would have been to have had the characters Gallus and Sandbar be the ones to be the characters who asked, one of them asked the other out on a date. My Little Pony has been subtly trying to hint the gay characters in the background, Lyra and Bonbon, and they do get married in the background. And I get it, there's the whole corporate side of things still, to this very day, struggling to prevent equality, which is baffling that it's still a problem. For fuck's sake, people. Ruby has already figured this out. For those of you who have not seen Ruby, it's a very action-oriented show, has already solved this problem. Already. Like a while ago, at this point. I've not caught up with Ruby, but, spoiler alerts, there is a relationship in that show that deals with a same-sex couple. And they do it well, or well enough, that it just beats everything out of the water that's out currently. So there's that. So yeah, there's the whole subjective nature, how I feel about it. I will always feel like the better route to have taken in that episode would be to have Sandbar ask Gallus out. And to them actually just going out there and saying, hey, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Instead of it being in the background. I've never been a fan of just it being in the background is enough. I know some people say that, the whole gender politics thing gets in the way. But to me, if you can write it well enough, I think you can make a main gay character totally fine. It's just a gay character that's the main character. It's totally fine. And Digimon never, at least to my knowledge, in the main staple of the shows I've seen, has never dealt with that subject before, or at least, again, to my knowledge. I could be wrong. Could have missed something along the way, but again, not to my knowledge. So, there's that. There is elements of My Little Pony in the later season, and I wanted to pull out that one specifically because that one really annoys me. I think it's probably one of my worst episodes of My Little Pony, just to pull it out as a grave example of, theme and how to really mess with a theme with pre-established information and making it turn out bad. That's exactly what I'm talking about. If you had several episodes to deal with this, you would have had a few episodes dealing with the acts, actually building up the acts, actually showing the traditions of the acts, and actually have the traditions mean something instead of, this is the thing we do because it is the time to do the thing. It's very boring, very generic, very bland, very forgettable, very bad. And when you take that and then you start somewhere else, you leave it for another part way later in the season and say, hey, remember those characters that we handled pretty poorly? Here's Yona. Here's her theme about her going back to her roots of where she came from the X. But the X have a terrible traditions as far as the audience is aware, so what's the point? See, from getting from point A to point C, or whatever, or point B, I'll use point C because I'll say the point B is the in-between. there is no in between for My Little Pony, and that is the biggest issue for My Little Pony in comparison to Digimon. There is no in between, so that when you have these two separate episodes that are separated by however many seasons, they don't correlate. They don't gel when you think about them back to back, and you think about what the character learns in this episode in this later season. It makes you think, wait a minute. In that previous season with the axe, they had terrible. You think back of all the bad stuff that happened back then. So again, I think the entire fix, what would have fixed My Little Pony entirely, the entire show, would have been to make it the format of Digimon. Have an overarching story, have morals, have time to flesh out between episodes. That's it. That's all they had to do. And they could have kept it with the same characters, I think, up to where season 4-ish, 5-ish is where they started to introduce the Student 6, or was that season 7? I actually don't remember which season they were introduced, but by the time the Student 6 was introduced is where the main 6, where their roles should have shifted into being more the tutors, the teachers, the life give, they're the ones teaching the lessons instead of, oh, we're gonna turn back the clock. We're gonna reset the lessons for the main characters still after 7 or 6 seasons, when you've introduced new characters already, and where My Little Pony characters of the past, the main 6, should again take on that mentor role. It's the really obvious solution, and yet it was not taken, and it doesn't make any sense why it wasn't taken. And again, you could have developed your other characters a whole lot more. And I'm gonna say it objectively speaking, Gallus is the best handled character, but he's still not given enough. You made this character essentially an orphan. There is so much to unpack there. So much, and you leave little breadcrumbs along the way, sure, but man, when you just leave it on one episode, and don't get me wrong, it's a really great episode where Gallus does the troublemaking to make the other students stay because it's his family, or he sees it as his family. You could have had a build up to that, or you could have had Gallus, explore, this sort of loneliness of being in that sort of scenario, because I think there can be a way to represent that without it being, too, crazily, adult. I think that you can represent it in a way that can correlate to both kids and adults. And that to me is what Digimon did. It didn't exclude. And that to me is what a mark of a good show is. To bring up Lily Orchid one last time in this video, she claims that the other portion of why My Little Pony fell apart was because the big fans, or the adult fans, were yelling on Twitter, and that the showrunners listened to that and they tried to course run the show in that direction. Now, I can't even confirm whether or not that's true. I don't have the proof for that, and I don't think she presented well enough proof for her her grievance at that point in time at all. What I will say instead of that, instead of saying, oh, it's the showrunners, they had that one episode where they were directly addressing the audience, and, again, a weaker episode for sure, but I don't think that really takes hold of the bigger issue. That's a microcosm of the bigger issue of the show, not the main issue of the show to me. And the way Lily represents her point in that video, that I'm probably going to link in the description so you can know what I'm talking about, it makes it seem, and this is more of a subjective feeling base, but I feel as if she was trying to make that point the stronger point of the the two main issues she brought up being between the world building and the creators wanting to please their fans. But to me, that is pretty poor reasoning, especially the second half. I can kind of see a little room for the first one, but not really. But the second one, not so much. You see, a show or a movie, say like Star Wars or something that has had a fan base for a while, Sonic the Hedgehog, My Little Pony, things that have been around for a while, they already have their fan bases. Listening to your fans, pleasing your fans, should be a part of your job, if you ask me. That should be the bare minimum of what you should be able to accomplish. You should be able to at least elevate your fans to a level of excitement, to a level of enjoyment, to a level of, yeah, I enjoyed that episode. You should be able to, as a creator, to your fans, say, here's your content, and it's really good content. That is the bare minimum of what a creator should do. Not this, you have to, go on your knees and beg to alter things to please your fans or whatever excuse she puts forth. No. That is the bare minimum of what you should be doing. That is a part of your requirement as a showmaker to entertain the people you're trying to entertain. That is the whole point. To invest people, to get people to watch your content. That is the whole reason to be a big YouTuber, or a YouTuber in general, is to get people to watch your content, to get people to listen to what you have to say, to engage them. That is the bare minimum. And she thinks that that's the main reason that the show is falling apart? No. That issue started a long time ago at the show's inception of My Little Pony. The bigger issue of where they decided to handle the show's elements and how they decided to break things up is where the show really fell apart. That is a bigger issue to me than just, we gotta please the fans. Of course you gotta please their fans. The fans are the reason you even have a show. Or, in the case of Lily, they're the reason you have a YouTube channel. Your fans are the reason you can continue to make YouTube content in the first place. I think that's a pretty basic thing to understand. So, yes, that to me is the bare minimum of what any show should do, is entertain their potential fans, and then to continue to entertain and enlighten and engage with their fans. That is your goal as a content creator, period. Where the show truly lacks, again, comes to a bigger scale. It's bigger themes and the way it decided to handle those themes through their characters and how they decided to pace their characters through said story. That is where you can get a more objective way of thinking. You can say, how well was this character written in this episode? How does that correlate to this episode? How is that well paced? How's, things of that nature. You can really measure those things. Whereas, again, pleasing your fans should be the bare minimum of what you should be doing anyway. So that is where I will leave that discussion as far as My Little Pony. So, to end off on the Digimon note, again, the future of Digimon seems to be a peak, a glorious enigma, if you will, of unknown. And I look forward to it. Because, to me, even when Digimon was at its lowest, which was pretty low to be fair at a point, um, I never felt like there was something to me that felt offensive or something that would make me go, no, I'm not a fan of Digimon anymore. That point never truly hit me. It came pretty close, sure, but I never felt like I was betrayed by something or that it didn't meet my expectations as a fan, which again is what a show should do. It should meet the expectations of the people watching the show to make them continue watching the show, or to continue watching that YouTube video, or to continue doing anything for that matter, watching the movie, anything you create. The point of keeping people engaged is the minimum of what you should be doing. So, yes, Digimon had hit a pretty low point, but to me, there was never a point where I felt betrayed by Digimon. Like, Digimon did anything necessarily bad, where My Little Pony, to me, has done a lot bad. And again, the more recent seasons is a fine example of that. So, to me, the future of Digimon is a lot brighter than My Little Pony right now. Um, and if you are a fan of My Little Pony and you've somehow made it this far, and you have not somehow come across Digimon, I would highly recommend watching every season. Why not? Give it a watch and see for yourselves the slow, rapid incline to a slopey middle low ground, and then the rise of a phoenix, as it were, for Digimon. And to be frank, I don't see that happening for My Little Pony right now. Yes, there is more content, but I honestly don't feel excited for it anymore. I don't feel that drive to go out of my way to see that new show that they're working on right now. Maybe I need to watch some of the content to really see for sure. Not, I might not give it as many shots as the original show, depending. But all I know is the future of Digimon over eclipses the light that MLP once shined on me. So I will continue to look forward to what Digimon has to offer, and perhaps leave My Little Pony behind once and for all. But who knows? Maybe it might surprise me, but that is yet to be seen. All I know is that it has left a much lower bar for me to latch on to, so I don't know if I want to right now. Anyways, with that being said, I think that is a lovely place to end this video. So if you enjoyed it, then please feel free to come over to my main channel, which will be a link in the description below, as well as my collab Dungeons & Dragons channel, where me and my pals go on several different adventures, and you can see me playing Ravik, the Lightning Kobold. And with that, I say, until next time everyone, farewell.